And I'll just do by order of my screen and just having one kind of announce themselves. First up, we have Alan.
Hi, present.
Brian.
Lowell.
Christopher. Jonathan.
Hey, yes, here.
Joe.
Yep.
Paul.
Howdy.
Alicia.
Hi.
Jake.
Present.
Awesome. Raymond.
Present.
Manny.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Lucia.
Hello.
Kurt. And then Craig Morrison, you there? I see you on the screen, but we don't hear you. Someone will come back, and then Michael.
I'm here. Merry Christmas.
Perfect. And then
Antonio, someone's by a number there, a phone number.
Yeah, I was just, would you
That
mind?
might be me, Aileen.
Oh, perfect.
Aileen McCallum. Sorry, I'm like running to the train, so I'm a little out of breath. I apologize.
Thank you, Aileen, for joining us. And now what we'll do is transition to our first public comment. I'm not sure if I see anyone. I know I see Rolf, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name, Rolf Isinger from DOTI. We have Nick here as well. Zach is back with us again.
We have two people that have signed up. They're over in the attendees section. The first one is David Mintzer. I might have said your name wrong, David. Sorry about that. I will promote David to a panelist and give him 3 minutes to speak. David, if you'd introduce yourself and then also tell us your subject, and then I'll let you know when your 3 minutes is up. Hi, David.
Hello, hi. Can you see and hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm David Mintzer. I'm just a kind of concerned and involved resident. I wanted to thank the board members for their time and energy here. I think this committee is a real opportunity to give us a voice regarding our streets and how we get around. I was able to listen to some of the meeting last month regarding the budget and setting priorities for capital improvements. And I just wanted to call out one project in particular. That's the I-25 and Broadway interchange expansion. DOTI is spending 88 million on phase one of that project. And that would be enough to fund 75% of the Denver Moves bike network citywide. And I'm just thinking a highway expansion that brings more cars into Denver, more air pollution. That's really not in line with the vision that we've been hearing lately. Phase two is going to cost even more money and is going to involve home demolitions. So I'm really hoping that this board can kind of dig into that project and ask some tough questions. Can we use that money for more kind of productive and more multimodal solutions in our city? And thank you.
Thanks, David, just for sharing that and joining us this evening. Michelle, did you say we had one more person?
We do.
Perfect.
Alejandra, I'm gonna promote you to panelist. There she is. Welcome, Alejandra.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and can you see us?
We can't see you.
You have to
Okay,
click start video.
okay, okay,
Click, okay.
okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, this is Alejandra Castañeda. I'm a parent here in Northwest Denver, and I'm here with Evie, a fifth grader, Taylor, also a fifth grader, and Violeta, my daughter, and also a fifth grader. And my topic is safer routes to school. And we wanted to tell you why we think that should be the priority for you guys as the board and for DOTI overall in the city. Evie.
Hello. So one day I was walking to school and this guy was speeding around and it was a red light and he tried going through it. I was walking across and he halted to stop and flipped me off.
Taylor.
So when you are crossing across Kenai, there's a lot of cars that don't stop at stoplights. No, not the stoplights, at the stop signs. And it's really quite scary because there's cars coming from all the directions and it's really hard to cross. So sometimes you will get that car that will stop for you, but then other cars might go, and it's really scary having to walk across that when all that is happening.
Thank you, Taylor. Violeta doesn't want to say anything. She just wishes that I was less eager to try to fix our school streets. But I want to thank you all for doing this. And I want you to think about these kids when you're thinking about investing in our infrastructure. And both Taylor, Violeta, well, all of us try to walk to school most of the time because it's not. We know it's important. We know it's the healthy thing to do, and we want to be able to do it safely. So thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. That was
Yes, thank you.
Wow. Thank you, guys. And Michelle, was that the last one, or do we have one more?
Nope, that was the last one.
Okay. And David and to Alejandra and the group, I did take down those notes just to reiterate that project I-25 and the Broadway interchange expansion, David, that you brought up, and then of course the safe routes to schools and the safety and getting in there and crossing the street. So we just want to note that I did take those notes, and we'll be reflecting on that, how we move forward as a board. I know those are definitely issues that we brought up as a group already. So we just want to thank you guys for reiterating those points for us. With that, we'll jump right into the report from DOTI leadership.
Thank you, Antonio, and that'll be me today. Adam has a scheduling conflict, but just a reminder, I'm Nick Williams, Deputy Manager, Chief of Staff here at DOTI. Excited about today's agenda. I think Zach coming back, we were real impressed with the level of questions you guys had for him last month. And I think delving a little bit deeper into the CIP side of things today, you'll be able to tell people, you know, what CIP means after this. And I think we're moving along because the 2023 budget process will be here before we know it. It seems crazy. It's still 2021, but I think these first few months of 22 will be critical for this group as we start to narrow down kind of recommendations, things like that. So looking forward to discussion. Also, Vision Zero, you know, that very relevant, especially with the questions around or the comments around safe routes to school. So excited to have Rolf here today to speak to that. And then just kind of going back to Denver Moves Everyone. Again, appreciate y'all's input on that a couple months ago. Had our second virtual open house last month, got some good engagement on there. And just as a reminder, we are kind of in the second phase right now where we are trying to gather information, inform kind of priority actions and different options for that plan. So we will keep this group apprised and certainly will come back for them for additional engagement. I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions folks might have. You guys are more excited to hear about the budget stuff, aren't you? I understand.
You know it, Nick. If anyone doesn't have any questions, oh, I see Paul. Paul, I see you with your hand up. Go ahead, jump in.
I'll just casually point out, I see a lot of unmuted microphones, and I've been on enough Zoom calls to know that could be disastrous. So for anyone not immediately wanting to ask a question, playing prevent defense here.
Yeah, I have 6 dogs in my office. It was just a coincidence we made it through my update without them barking.
Nice. Okay, then. If that's it, we'll jump right into the capital improvement planning and funding agenda item. So I'm excited that we get to touch on this, especially given that we are going to have a little bit bonus time for questions, it looks like, hopefully.
All right, so I'm guessing this is on me. So hey, thanks everybody for having me back. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hey, Paul, your hand's still up. Did you want to get something preemptively or are we good? Okay. Hey, Michelle, you disabled screen sharing. Will you turn that on for me, please? And while Michelle's letting me do that, I'll just say for this, you guys, same as last time, I'm happy to take questions as we go. I'll take questions afterwards. Please feel free to interrupt me. I think the more we talk through these in real time, probably the more relevant it is. So just feel free to jump on in, throw your hand up, or just kind of shout at me and we'll move along. Let me, are we good, Michelle? Okay. Okay. Everybody seeing my screen okay? Great. All right, appreciate it. Okay, so we will be doing a deeper dive into our 2022 capital budget and also touching on what little we know currently about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that just passed. So with that, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So for today, we will be talking about our overall process for building our capital budget, some of the methodology involved, our equity scoring. I heard you guys loud and clear last time that you guys wanted some more information on how we manage equity over here at DOTI and how we ensure equitable results for all of our residents. And so we're going to be doing a deeper dive into that through several slides. And then results, what's allocated. I know this is in the budget book and it may be a little bit of a rehash, but I do want to make sure that we touch on that. And then after that, we'll be looking at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Again, we don't know a ton about this. We know our statewide allocation. We have a little bit of information from CDOT, but we really don't have enough to do a deep dive. But as those results continue to come to us, we will continue to update this group. So with that, let's jump right into the capital process and results. A few of these slides are just a little bit of a refresher. So as we talked about last time, capital improvement funds are non-lapsing funds. That means they continue to roll. So there's a difference between that and our operating funds. And our operating funds are things like general fund that manage our annual operations, salaries, services, and supplies, whereas capital funds are non-lapsing and then they're non-lapsing because they are generally tied to multi-year endeavors. So those balances continue to roll. Unused funds continue to roll. One other thing worth mentioning on capital improvement funds is that they're made up of several sources, including bonds, grants, and other allocations. With this slide, we saw this in the last time I joined you guys. We have our transportation maintenance process, our facilities maintenance process, our discretionary process, and our wastewater capital process. They're broken down piece by piece. And again, we touched on this last time, but holistically, we work with our partners in capital planning and programming to understand what our allocation is based on our needs. And then we go through several stages that allow us to get to an endpoint where these funds are allocated and which programs and projects that they are put into. So a little bit of a deeper dive here on methodology. On the left-hand side is what we did to build the 2022 capital budget. On the right, we saw this graphic and proposed how these priorities will be met with the advent of this advisory board. So jumping right in for how we did this for 2022, we considered several factors, including risk factors. And we talked about this a little last time, funding gaps, i.e. a bond expires before the project is set to be completed. How do we address that? And we score based on that. What is the economic impact? Generally, things that return more than $10 million of investment into a particular community are scored higher than things that return lower based on other factors as well. And then how long will it take us to get to substantial completion? Will it help us meet our commitments? Will that substantial completion cause, if there's a longer time to substantial completion, what are the interruptions to the community and to the people? And then from there, we go into the things that we discussed. Equity, and as I said, we'll go through that in our next several slides. What does this tie to our citywide commitments, Spark, Rise? How do we align with the mayor's priorities, with our own priorities, and with city council's priorities? And again, as we discussed going into next year with the advent of this advisory board, how your priorities help us understand some of that stuff. Moving into equity, and again, we're going to peel the onion here a little bit over the next several slides, but focusing heavily on equity, we start with ensuring that our equity activities make sense. So having equitable investments and ensuring that those investments focus on bringing every area of the city up to the same standards. We work for equitable contracting to ensure that our small business enterprises, minority business enterprises, and women business enterprises are utilized as suppliers whenever possible, and then ensuring equitable workforce development. Here at DOTI, we view equity as the problem and inclusion as the solution, and the more voices that we have from more diverse backgrounds, the more understanding we're going to have of how to address problems in these equity areas. So when we talk about budget equity, so I'll say that last slide was sort of our first step. We move into budget equity, and this is where my shop becomes responsible for ensuring equitable delivery of all of our projects, programs, etc. We work with the Office of Social Equity and Innovation every year. We go to their annual training on budget equity, me and my staff, and then I require my senior leadership to work a little bit closer with SEI through their train the trainer sessions and through a better understanding of how their office works and what their equity lens looks like. This budget equity guide, I will give over to Michelle and I'll have her share out to this group. It's a document that you're welcome to peruse. But we view this, again, as an opportunity to deliver equitable results. And so that is where finance really applies an equity lens. From there, our equity considerations, working with our project delivery administration, we make additional considerations. So we map these out, trying to understand the geographic location, what are the areas of highest need, what the overall asset condition is of the city, and then what the neighborhood asset condition is to help us identify the areas where we should really penetrate and dive in. The result is that we currently have 95% of our MAC projects completely or partially within underserved communities. And so you can see the scale here of where we are making our most targeted investments based on the equity score that shows it's an underserved area. This is both wastewater and CIP, so underground construction and above ground construction. So then jumping in to the 6-year need of the city. This was identified prior to the passage of the infrastructure bill, so this number can change. But currently, over 12 years, we're going to need about $3.97 billion to accomplish our more lofty goals. Again, this is citywide, not just DOTI. So buildings, parks and recreation, transportation, waterways, sustainability, and public art. But these are investments that we are committed to making to make sure that we fit our need. Moving right into our funding distribution for 2022, our results ended in total capital funds of about 179 million. 64 million went to wastewater or underground vertical construction. I'm sorry, horizontal construction. We have outstanding financial obligations for our debt of about 19 million. Our maintenance commitment is about 51 million. Transportation system enhancements is nearly 27 million. Our transportation SRF, the system enhancement from the meter increase, is 9.2 million. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And we're investing 9.3 million in facilities overall. For some of the highlights, We continue to invest heavily in alternative modes of transportation as well as safety initiatives such as Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School. Became relevant in this conversation, but currently our investment in Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School is $21.7 million combined. Another $1 million has been requested for the Strategic Transportation Plan, bringing the total dedicated to the Strategic Transportation Plan up to $4 million. We continue to maintain our assets in a state of good repair with nearly 51 million to maintain our transportation assets and 6 million for public facilities. 3 million has been dedicated for the Americans with Disability Act improvements at city facilities. And finally, we continue to grow and improve our wastewater network with 59 million in capital funding and 5 million to finalize the restack of the wastewater building. We are going to finalize the renovation and cleanup of the wastewater building. We have some HVAC issues along with some heating and air conditioning concerns that really negatively impacted our staff there over the summer. We're investing dollars to ensure that we are in a good place there. So when we are looking at transportation system enhancements, some of the $21 million in savings from the Platte to Park Hill, we had $21 million in savings from Platte to Park Hill, and that allowed a large investment in our North Denver connectivity, which is about 3.8 million. Funding has also been designated for design efforts on some large reconstruction projects like the Alameda Underpass and the Santa Fe Streetscape, with a goal of enhanced mobility options in these areas, and then $1.5 million in resource support to better deliver projects on time and on budget. For transportation capital maintenance, we received an allocation of just under 51 million for the maintenance of our transportation assets. The bulk of that allocation will be dedicated to our street maintenance programs to continue to meet our paving targets and maintain a healthy pavement condition index across the city. Other projects include the rehabilitation of the 20th Street Viaduct, installation of new and rebuilt traffic signals, and maintenance of the intelligent transportation system and traffic management centers. For wastewater, the total represents the needed increases to deliver on our new 6-year plan, which we discussed in our last meeting. And also the remainder of our Platte to Park Hill savings has been repurposed into 2 different wastewater projects, 3.4 million for the global levy, and it complements the 7 million in the 2022 wastewater budget, and 14.4 million for 48th Avenue drainage, and that complements the 8 million in the wastewater 2022 budget. For the RISE bond, since this passed, we have several different program areas that we've invested in. You can see they are spread across several council districts. There's a large return on investment in terms of jobs created and wages provided to our resident people across the state. And just for reference, the jobs and wage figures are produced by an economic model based on the anticipated full cost of the project. And then finally, we discussed this a bit. Oh, Jonathan, I see your hand up. What can I help with?
Wow, lightning fast catch there on my hand. That was like half a second. A quick question about that economic model. You mentioned on one of the earlier slides that in capital planning, as you go through the early scoring criteria, you do model economic impact. Wondering if this is that same model, jobs provided, wages provided, and also it sounded like you said limiting to assumptions of jobs and wages provided within the city or within the state. Is there anything more to that economic impact model for sort of top level scoring as opposed to RISE bond transportation scoring? Are they the same models? Are they different? Does that question make sense?
It does. So with the RISE bond, we did try to maintain consistency, but to be completely honest, there's obviously differences because of the funding amount in the bond, the timing of it. But when we look at that economic model, I think there's some places that we're a little bit more in depth with some of our longer term projects or more consistent funding sources, where we start to understand how, for example, the improvement of the neighborhood asset condition may impact our return on investment there. With the RISE bond, at the point, while it was proposed and while we were certain large portions of it would pass, we were working with some uncertainty and we were moving fairly quickly. And so we tried to apply the exact same lens, but we were also moving at an accelerated pace. And so I think there are some places where we potentially lost a little bit of what we were, or not lost, but we didn't quite, we didn't have the time to do the full assessment that we would usually do. Like I said, we tried to keep the exact same lens, but we generally work in, you know, especially with capital, we work in a longer period of time and have a longer track record to help us trace some of this stuff. And when the RISE bond was proposed, we were already a little deeper in our budget and in our cycle. So we didn't quite have the ability to jump in and do as deep of a dive as we would with other stuff. That said,
so it just sounds like RISE, we did jobs and wages with some limited other areas. The full economic model might also include, it sounds like an inference of, you know, property tax growth in the area. I'm not sure, are we also using assumptions like increased productivity due to lower travel times and congestion, or have we like pulled those out now? I'm just curious to know more about what else is considered there.
yeah, so you're absolutely right. So yes, like I said, when I was talking about the neighborhood asset index or the neighborhood asset condition index, that does signify, you know, what the return on investment is for the community and what sales tax would grow from by having better infrastructure around particular businesses, buildings, things of that nature. And then, yeah, we absolutely do consider what changes are to traffic flows and both traffic flows and multimodal transportation usage around those areas when we start to do our set, or as we dive into our assessment.
Thanks.
Okay. So jumping over to the transportation SRF, I saw this slide shared last week. I love seeing this slide shared because I built this slide. So a little point of pride, but the dollar meter increase will allow us to make investments in several key areas, including our Denver Moves bicycle implementation, which is getting about 1.8 million, along with sidewalk gap and safety repair, which is getting again about 1.8 million. Additional dollars for the Vision Zero action plan, again 1.8 million. And then our Denver Move transit implementation for about 3.7 million. And then finally, we are moving about 300,000 to our operating fund. This will employ 2 additional folks, a project manager and an inspector, to ensure that our sidewalks are brought up to a state of good repair. So moving over to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So admittedly, we do not know as much about the local allocations of this. We expect to know more in the coming weeks, but very little has been told to us about the municipal allocation or even the municipal allocation model. But we do have the statewide allocation. So over the next 5 years, Colorado will receive $3.9 billion for roads and bridges, $916 million for public transit, $688 million for improved water quality, $432 million for airports and ports, $100 million for broadband, and $57 million for electric vehicles. This is straight from the White House's website, and I'm happy to share this as well. And you can see the press release and the announcement. Excuse me. Specific to DOTI, roads and bridges will absolutely be in our wheelhouse, as will public transit and improved water quality. Ports and airports, it's a little dependent on where the boundaries are. If there's some of the roads, say on Peña, that need some sort of improvement and they're going to count that as part of airport improvement, we may be jumping into some of that. But really, for the most part, this is DIA's funding allocation. We won't have anything to do with the broadband, and with electric vehicles, that's mostly going to be CASR, although we will oversee installation of EV charging stations within the right of way. So we got a quick update. Oh, yeah, sorry, Antonio.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Certainly.
And I'll throw Jonathan's question in at first. Do we know if the allocation from this act disappeared on me? Is capital funding only, or is it OPEX? That was from John.
As far as we know right now, it's capital funding only. We've asked that question and partnered quite a bit with our partners in DOF who help us manage these federal allocations and understand them. There's frankly, quite a bit of ambiguity around this act. While we expect to see additional raise and Tiger grants, we don't know if that lends itself to have an opportunity for OPEX dollars. But at the moment, what we know is that this is intended to be all capital. But again, some of this is nebulous and we don't know a whole lot at the moment. We're hoping within the next couple of weeks, we have a really clear understanding of what this translates to and what this means for us as a city.
And is the process where you apply through our state to get these funds, or can you apply directly to the Department of Transportation for these projects? How does that fit in? How does that work for you guys?
So we currently apply through the Colorado Department of Transportation. So we apply through the state on that, although we are exploring options to allow ourselves to become a direct recipient. We haven't completely finished the analysis or gotten to a point where we're able to say with confidence that we're going to do one or the other. Although I will say we're leaning towards trying to be a direct recipient going forward. And I see Mr. Williams has popped up, so I'm hoping my foot is not needing to be dislodged from my mouth.
No, I don't think so, Zach. But yeah, just to add that, so there will be a variety of kind of sources and distributions of this. You know, some will continue to come through the state, through CDOT. This bill, our previous executive director and a number of local municipalities really advocated for more funding direct to cities, so not having to go through CDOT or other processes. But there will still be a fair amount that is then distributed through the DRCOG, the Regional Council of Governments. I think we have a presentation coming up in the new year on that and that process. And then also, I think we'll see a lot of competitive grants, and we've done very well with those in the past. We expect to continue to do well with those under this. But yeah, kind of a real wide variety of how it can potentially come to us. And we're going to certainly try to take advantage of every dollar we can.
Have you guys talked about what a timeline would look like in terms of identifying what you want to do with the opportunity here?
We have not quite yet, Antonio, but the reason for that is simply because we only know what we know at this point. I think when we understand what the allocations amount, what the allocation amounts look like, we'll then work with our partners in capital planning and programming to understand what the DOTI allocation will then look like. And then from there, when we know what that looks like, then we apply all those other lenses that I spoke to before, including working with you guys, our equity lens, alignment with our internal and external priorities, our mayoral priorities, our council priorities, and then coming up with a list of investments that we can make with these dollars. But with as nebulous as this is right now, when we know the shape of it more, then we're going to have a lot more answers, and we'll provide more details when we understand that a little bit better.
Gotcha. And one last thing, and when you do kind of get to that point of after consulting each of the departments and the mayor and all those parties, is this something you plan to bring to get some community engagement from some of the local organizations, or how do you guys envision that process in terms of determining these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. We have our Office of Community and Business Engagement that does quite a bit of work reaching out to our neighborhoods through, oh, Nick, I'm forgetting what CAGs are, our community advisory groups, through their CAGs. So their community advisory groups, we bring the stuff to them to inform them and to understand that we're aligning with their needs as well. And also helping them to understand what this means, what this is, and what this does for them and their communities. So we do take quite a few steps to ensure that our community is engaged all around. And apologies, I am in the office today and there seems to be a fire truck right next to me, so I'm sorry. So Joe, I see your hand, but Antonio, did I cover all your questions, or do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, Joe, he can take the floor.
All right.
If I could just real quick, Joe, I'm sorry to cut in. And just to be real clear with this isn't like a one shot deal. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. It's going to be, this is over, what is this? It's typically 5 years. It usually ends up being more, but this will be, think of it as like a broad program. So there will be a lot of different avenues to how we approach all of the different facets of this over the next 5 years.
And that's a really good point from Deputy Manager Williams as well, is that the way that we anticipate this is that the funding allocation, the direct federal funding allocation will come in, But as we mentioned, there's numerous grant opportunities as well. And those are, as far as we know right now, the next phase of this. So there'll be a allocation and then a competitive grant application process that will come afterwards. And so this is going to come in several phases over the next 5 years as these dollars are allocated out. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, I wondered, are these all distinct silos? And therefore there's no intermingling and all that? The roads and bridges get, that's it? Mhm.
Yes, these are distinct silos. Because these are federal dollars, they are subject to federal audit. And so we do have to show levels of compliance to ensure that we have spent the dollars appropriately, so that I didn't take $1 billion of bridge money and renovated my office, something, so it's just a level of compliance that we have to maintain. And so they are siloed. It's relatively rigorous, but there's a reason for that, and it's to ensure the accurate use of these funds. But if we see opportunities that we can potentially leverage these dollars, we'll take that and see how that plays out. But it does have to align with the federal purpose. Alicia?
Thank you.
Unmute myself. I'm wondering, in preparation, I know that a lot of things are still in the air, but just for us to kind of get a head start or in preparation for this, can we start going through some community engagement processes, say, I don't know, next year or early next year, before we actually even receive the funding, so that we have some ideas on the ground of where community would like to invest some of these dollars? Is that a possibility?
I would just jump in real quick, Zach. Yeah, I think it is. And I think, I know we went through potential agenda items, but kind of our community engagement strategy seems like something that would be very relevant to this group, and certainly can get a presentation around that for y'all.
Thank you.
Kind of in Alicia's vein, would this be an opportunity to kind of extend what we see already in the opportunity for participatory budgeting, kind of like here, where communities really do have that input and can come to the table and bring their creative ideas to solve some of the problems that they face? Would this be an opportunity to really just kind of go beyond what we typically do for community engagement and really have a process that really is involved, just like we're doing with the participatory budget process, where projects are being led, through or being reviewed through a community or resident steering committee. Residents are submitting projects, whether it's safety or safe routes to school or sidewalks. Is this opportunity for that to happen? Because I would hate for us to, do our typical, community engagement when, like I said, this is almost once in a generation kind of opportunity of funds that we're getting dumped in 5 years. And could we do something that would be, that will push the boundaries on what we do in community engagement, not just do our typical process, so that we do see that true engagement from everyone and see that variety of ideas, and we can just bring a lot more people to the table through that process.
I think it's a good question, Antonio. So with participation-based budgeting, really the goal is, as you said, to try and get as many people involved as possible. As we go through this, I think we'll evaluate the opportunity and also the timeline in terms of usage. And as Nick said, there's going to be several tranches and opportunities to this. And so, that can evolve as we move forward. And so, if the first tranche comes quickly and we have to move quickly, that may not be an opportunity for that full participation-based budgeting, but it also makes us aware of the grant tranche, the subsequent year's tranche, and potentially we can engage our stakeholders more there as well. I think Alicia's point's a good one as well, where if we start early, we can dive in a little bit earlier and potentially have some line of sight of where this is going and what the opportunities are for something like that. As I said, we'll evaluate it as it comes through, but we always try and take the opportunity for some of that stuff.
Just one more thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Alicia, I think Alan's hand was up. I want to maybe let him jump in, and I'll jump back to you if that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, it's okay. Alicia, I'll hold my to the end. Zach, I wanted to let you get through the whole thing before I ask mine.
Sure. Okay, go ahead, Alicia.
I'm sorry, just one more thing. I know that you all just said some of the money we have to apply for and also looking at if we get funded directly, et cetera. I know that, and I don't know if this is true in this area, but I know that in other areas, it seems to be more, the federal government is looking more at groups who have engaged community and have a robust community group working with them. So it might be to the advantage of us to have these efforts in place and also, you know, have some authentic community engagement. Not that we don't have it now, but just having some different ways to demonstrate how we've engaged our community and how they've weighed in on the projects. And from the community standpoint, I think it would be beneficial to get their buy-in and ownership so that they can be advocates for this as well.
Yeah, it's a great point, Alicia, and you're absolutely right. And I would say probably around the grant phase that becomes really relevant, because that's where the scoring becomes competitive, and that's where we need to show that we're doing things that actually make a difference in our community. And so that engagement does become critical. And as I said, community engagement for us isn't a question mark. It's just ensuring that, you know, we're able to move nimbly and plan ahead and have line of sight on this stuff. And so we're continuing to evaluate, and we want the community involved as much as humanly possible, and we'll do so in the best way that we can. And Alan, I only have one more slide, so if you want to jump in, you're more than welcome.
I'll dive in after. Thanks, Zach.
Okay. All right. So then last but not least, we got a quick update from CDOT. This doesn't provide a lot, but this is one of the first lines of sight that we've been able to see. We have a full public document from CDOT, which I will hand over to Michelle to publish to this group, along with the budget equity guide and the White House press release. So this is highway, road, and bridge formula programs. It does not include discretionary or grant money. So as you can see, that's already being bifurcated a bit. But what we can see is that we're looking at statewide average new annual dollars of 117 million for existing programs, 82 million for new programs, and 199 million for, and a total of 199 million for new and existing programs. Our best line of sight on this is that based on population, commuter mobility, et cetera, we're anticipating getting about 20% of that annually. Now, that formula is not something that we're married to. It's something that's applied in the past, but again, we're working with a bit of a different animal here. I know this is very, very nebulous, but I tried to give you guys as much detail as humanly possible and be as transparent as possible. And this was the best line of sight that we had. In the CDOT document, there's quite a bit of discussion around the grant expansion. And so, as I said, I'll have that sent out and you're welcome to read through it. And I will take your questions and concerns, but before I do that, I'm always happy to join this group, and I really appreciate being invited. So, Mr. Allen, I've been waiting for you.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm going to go all the way back to, it was like one of your early slides around equity. You know, I'm curious in the formula, certainly a very comprehensive process around, you know, equitable investments. Do you all ever work with Denver Public Health and looking at potential harm that might be created in you know, increasing throughput of some of the interstates? For example, like, you know, we know Valverde, Sun Valley, Elyria, Swansea have some of the highest asthma rates in the city. And do we consider like, hey, what kind of impact might it have to potentially increase traffic over the long run if we're looking at induced demand and increasing the volume and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work to ensure that we are partnering up with both DDPHE and DHS to understand some of those things. Now, it's done at a higher level through our capital planning and programming through the Department of Finance, but they're the ones who help us understand all of those items as the appropriations start to funnel down and we look at our impact. So as we propose these things, it's a constant cycle between our agency partners to really understand what, beyond the economic and equity impacts, what the health and safety impacts are to our residents. And then we continue to look at that at a DOTI level. As I mentioned back here, in the substantial completion timeline, we're careful to understand that, you know, a 10-year project with trucks on the road, debris flying everywhere, we're careful to understand that that does have an impact, and we want to make sure that we try and minimize that. And we also want to make sure that if it's a 3-year project, it doesn't turn into a 6-year project. and that's why we report out in our annual report every year what our scheduled performance index is, which mandates us to work to ensure that 90% of our projects are completed on time and on budget. I'm happy to report, I believe we're currently at about 96% for 2021. And that those timelines do become important for several reasons, but especially the one you just mentioned there, Alan.
And not so much the construction timeline, but the overall air quality impacts on those communities after, is completed, I think is the bigger thing we're looking at. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that mitigation is something that we look at quite a bit too on our, it's not like we just stop and we're out. We try to mitigate any of those impacts going forward, and we continue to understand them from there. I would say a lot of that mitigation then goes back into DDPHE's hands after we understand some of that, but again, it's cyclical, and we work with our agency partners to really ensure that we're doing what's right for the resident, not only equity-wise, financially, but also health-wise.
And this is the kind of input we're seeking and trying to get with our Denver Moves Everyone, to really lay out that 30-year plan. Those are the kind of things, that's where you make that impact that then really guides the transportation planning, designing, building for the next 30 years on there. So that's our big opportunity right now, and that's why we're really pushing people for engagement and really engagement aspect of it, including health effects and stuff like that, is a big part of that.
And one more question for both either Zach or Nick. Thank you for that answer. The I-25 and Broadway project that Dr. Mintzer mentioned in the public comment, where does that fall into the CIP? Does that fall into this criteria? Is that from previous years, or is that a completely different bucket that something like that, a decision like that's being made?
So it's a little bit of everything, Alan, but the vast majority of that and the large amount of funding comes from our federal highway funds. We are supplanted by the Highway User Tax Fund, which again, back to I think the question on the buckets around capital funding, that's one of those buckets that we're a little voluntold about. Now we're happy to take on the project, and we believe it'll improve traffic congestion, especially in that area. I don't know if you've ever come northbound down 25, but there's a really interesting interchange onto Lincoln that causes quite a bit of congestion and confusion. It's the same on the southbound side on Broadway, and I realize they're sort of one and the same. But like I said, we have limited control of that funding bucket. We help to guide our destiny around what we're going to do there, but the funding itself and the appropriate allocation is part of our federal highway allocation through the Highway User Tax Fund.
And is that limited just to interstates, or could like Federal Boulevard apply to that as well, since it's also a federal road?
So it's actually limited to interstates. They tend to stay off of those roads, and the roads themselves, we actually maintain better control of, even arterial ones like federal.
Thank you.
You bet. Jake.
Yeah, bit of a connective tissue between what Alan's previous topic was and the next topic, but in seeing, like, I'm actually glad you have this budget methodology slide up. I was curious about where, like, what budget formulas go into Vision Zero and how that's thought of in here. Like, in particular, like, is there formulas tied to potential increase of injury or death on streets, as well as addressing high injury network streets? Because I know we've seen some recent capital projects in those zones, and curious how that's factored in.
Yeah, so with Vision Zero, and Rolf could probably, or actually it's John, but he could probably speak to that a little bit more. But we really try to be proactive rather than reactive. So of course, we're always going to address the areas where we're seeing problems, but we're also looking at areas that potentially have future problems, and that we know there's something wrong there. Areas that are getting higher in commuter mobility, but are maybe lacking in signs or signals, or the road condition index is there, or there's sidewalk gap. And so when we look at Vision Zero, we look at it pretty holistically. I'll say we've really been transitioning as the program to a more proactive view. But again, when we really started with all of this, we were trying to be responsive to the areas that were the most impactful, where we were seeing the most fatalities and injuries. We're trying to get ahead of that now, and I think we're actually really starting to move the ball. But again, I will let John speak to that a bit in his next few slides, but I'm happy to take additional questions, or if we need to get John in, he can jump on.
I think Lucia has one if John.
Yeah,
doesn't
sorry,
jump.
I saw Lucia. I was making sure John or Jake was done. Cool. All right, Lucia, what can I help you with, ma'am?
Hi there. So I guess I want to know, I just listened to a podcast this afternoon, the Strong Towns podcast, and it was basically a public meeting that took place after death of someone, a pedestrian on State Street in front of the public library, if anybody is familiar or read Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. It's been talked about a lot. And basically, the podcast is basically translating what the non-technical people are saying and to each other, because it's basically, they're speaking two different languages. So, I mean, I'm kind of curious as to what kinds of standards DOTI is using, the NAFTA, or are we moving forward with that? You know, because what made me think about it is when you're talking about the Lincoln and I-25 project that Dr. Mintzer mentioned in the public comments, you mentioned congestion being bad at the Lincoln and I-25, but I mean, I live near there. I go through it frequently. It's bad for maybe 30 minutes out of the day. And is congestion really a bad thing? I mean, are we operating on the assumption that all congestion is bad? I mean, when you have congestion, you have slower traffic, and you may have fender benders, but you don't have people dying because people aren't going fast enough. And so I'm just curious about how DOTI is thinking about it. And maybe that's not your question if you're the budget guy, but maybe somebody can answer that question for me, please.
Yeah. So Lucia, I'm not an engineer. I just play one on Zoom. And honestly, I'm probably not the best person to answer this. And if we need to get an engineer in the room, we can work on that for our next meeting to maybe discuss some of the standards that we hold ourselves to. But I will say, you know, you're absolutely right. Sometimes congestion is not necessarily a bad word. And through our shared streets and through our temporary outdoor expansion patio programs, we did see slower speeds, more people walking and more people rolling through the streets. And that is generally a good thing. Part of the reason that we identify congestion as quote unquote bad, and that is my terminology and probably not an official engineering term, but it's that cars idle in place, and that creates an environmental impact. But you're absolutely correct. There are offsets to that include, like you said, slower speeds that may be fender benders and not large fatal accidents or pileups. But again, that's probably the best answer I can offer right now. And I will we'll either circle back to this group, Nick and I, through via email or via chat, or we will bring a real engineer and not a TV one to the next meeting. Thank you.
Just like us to think about it as a larger group moving forward, and as we go further and further into the 21st century, that we don't continue with 20th century thinking. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Zach, if I could bring Alicia's question to the table. I saw I was putting in the chat. It says,
I'm sorry, was there something in chat? Did I miss something?
It was just one. In public health, we often rely on health impact assessments to determine the impact, for lack of a better term, a program, policy, construction project might have on health and equity. There are various levels of HIAs, rapid, intermediate, advanced. Is this something that we can explore as we initiate projects moving forward?
Yeah, I believe we can. I want to be a little careful here and make sure that I'm not either duplicating work or stepping on the toes of our partners at DDPHE who probably have a better eye on this than I do. But you know, if we're missing that currently and there's something that we can do to have a more comprehensive view, we'll absolutely entertain it and see what that looks like. Although I will just say, as I mentioned, there's a lot of connectivity between our agency partners as a city before this is broken out to specific allocations for capital for various departments. And I would imagine they probably have those assessments in mind. Executive Director McDonald is very aware of those things and pushes hard on them, but we could circle back and get you an answer and understand that a little bit better as we understand that high level process before it's allocated down.
And I think we're similar goals, probably different terminology, talking about project prioritization, and there's a lot of different factors. We've talked about a number of them here today, but yeah, we can certainly go into more detail about project selection and project prioritization process.
And we could even explore bringing one of our partners from CPP around or having them weigh in.
But I did have one additional question, kind of going back to the equity piece. In terms of procurement and working with local and minority businesses, is there a metric that you guys make sure that you're hitting every time? I guess, for example, we want to make sure 30% of our projects are being doled out to local and or minority owned businesses. Do you guys have that kind of metric?
We do, and I'm so sorry, Antonio, I don't have it right at my fingertips, but I will just say, as the person who contracting and procurement currently sits underneath me, we are disproportionately high with SBE, MBE, and WB. We are very, very, very well aware. And again, I don't remember our exact metric and I don't have it right at my fingertips, but the vast majority of our contractors are SBE, MBE, WB. There's it may sound surprising, but a surprisingly small number of what you would consider big box retailers. We really engage our community here. I would say if we do have something that's a little bit larger in scale, that's not SB, MB, or WB, it's oftentimes associated with a local business. So they do business here, or they are headquartered here in the city. And those are places where we do that. So when you get outside of those, the number of contracts that we have for our capital projects and really across all DOTI work is small if it's not in those groups. And I will I'll work to figure out what the metric is on that. I know there is a level that we try and maintain ourselves to.
And it depends on the type of contract it is. So every contract has a goal, a percentage of participation by SMWBE contractors. Goal kind of being to start to build folks up so that they're not a small business anymore, or that they have the ability to play with the big players in there. And a lot of times you'll see that taking the form of a large prime, and then in order to meet their goals, they then hire out SBE, MBE, WBE, Meeby Weeby is my favorite way to say it, on there. And that is certainly something we work very closely with our DISBO office. And I say that, and I'm blanking on what that acronym means. I've used the term
Small
DISBO
business
so
and
much.
opportunity.
Thank you very much. So we meet with them weekly, review contract participation on that. That is in every one of our contracting activities. That's a part of the process for contracting. So we have excellent data on that, and our agenda, I think we're going out to 2025 at this point. But I could see this group would enjoy a presentation on our process for that. I think it's one of the better ones. That was our previous executive director's one of his priorities when he came here to DOTI, and I think we've got a pretty sophisticated program at this point on that. So yeah, happy to share that with y'all too.
And to Nick's point, when you look at that with the lens of the prime and what's subbed out to SBE, MBE, WBE, we do exceedingly well in that realm.
Perfect. Did anyone else have any questions that they want to bring to Zach?
I just have a quick comment. I just really appreciate, Zach, your thoroughness and how prepared you came to this conversation and the last one. Like it's really, really helpful, and it's clear the city is lucky to have you as a public servant. So thank you very much.
No, I really appreciate that, Jake. That's really nice. And I'm on 7th and Sherman, so go Big Ten. I see Councilman Hines a lot. He knows my dog. We're buddies, so I'll take that. But no, I really appreciate it, and I see the value in this group and appreciate your partnership. And so I always try to make sure that I give you guys as much as humanly possible and as much as I can to ensure that this partnership is productive and we are good to go forward and launch into the future.
Thanks so much, Zach.
All right, with that, I will give the screen back, and you guys can move on to your next agenda item.
Thank you, Zach. Next, we have Vision Zero. And then this, for those who are on the call, we're just going to be reviewing Denver's Vision Zero program. And I'm pretty sure we have a presentation on that.
All right. I think that's
me. I think my screen's still showing. Michelle, will you kick me off? I'm not sure why I can't find my. stop screen share on this. We're all used
Yes,
to Teams over here.
I will
Jen.
gladly kick you off.
All right. I
And Rolf,
appreciate it.
Rolf, you should have control too. I gave you control. So let me get Zach out of there, and then
And I'll just say you guys are in excellent hands. I work with Mr. Eisinger all the time, and he's very, very knowledgeable as well and should be well prepared.
Right. Thank you, Zach. All right, give me just 1 minute as I clean up my, all right, let's see here. Try to share, make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Let me go in presentation mode for the PowerPoint. And as I do this, if anybody want to take a stretch break or anything, feel free and all that when I figure out, you have 3 different screens and trying to share the right one.
Antonio and Zach, just before we get into Ross' presentation, as I followed along on the CIP demonstration and presentation, I was hoping that we were going to see a little bit more detail and granularity about the actual projects that are being considered, and maybe as a test or a just a confirmation that to see how they actually go through the process of being rated, and then have a conversation about are they in fact meeting the vision that this advisory council has been established to oversee. And I don't get that. We got the same information, very good information and presentation from Zach that we got the first time. So what am I missing here, or am I expecting something that the rest of the advisory panel isn't? Over.
So I'll let the panel speak to the last part of this. And I'm sorry, Christopher or Chris, what do you prefer?
Chris is fine. Okay,
because if someone calls me Zachary, I'll go stand in the corner because I think my mother's yelling at me. So I appreciate the commentary, and I understand it. In terms of the presentation, we try to do a little bit of a deeper dive and break this down, but I do understand some of this was a rehash, and I can understand and appreciate that. I brought it to the program level and the new projects within 2022. And again, I'm happy to share the slide deck. We have quite a few numbers of, there's a large number of PRJs, and we are not trying to hide those to not be transparent. We can absolutely bring those. I think that's probably something that the advisory board would have to decide and request, and I'm happy to accommodate. But if we're going to go project by project, there's the program level. So the program may be Vision Zero, and the project may be a signal in one of our neighborhoods. And so when I say program, the program is the top level program like a Vision Zero. And then when I say PRJ, that's the project, and there's quite a few of those. It is a large level of information, and we're happy to pull it together. I would say it would take a little bit of time for us to get together, but we're happy to walk through that. It's, again, trying to make this condensed and ensure that we meet the timelines and be respectful of the time and not, take up a few hours of everybody's time on an afternoon, but it's not that it's something that we can't do.
For my interest, and I think that I shared that with Michelle, we were hoping already. But I don't want to get us off in the wrong direction. If that's not what the charter of this, be happy with the large appropriation buckets that we've gotten and understand that they're being executed and formulated as they should be. But I thought that we were supposed to look at that and to comment on the value of each.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like I said, there's and I saw in the chat that doesn't have to be a formal presentation. well, I know there's some charter questions that are being finalized tonight. I'll leave it to the group, but I'll just say that I'm a happy soldier and happy to participate. And I'm here with the team, and you guys let me know. I will just say, as we're heading into year and stuff like that, it will take a little time to prepare. So I'll ask for a little bit of patience, but I assume we can probably get something together fairly quickly.
Just to report a couple things that were mentioned in the chat here. Aileen had said, hey, maybe we don't have to walk through each project, but maybe just look at an Excel spreadsheet listing projects that are over some certain budgetary amount. Echoed by Alan, doesn't have to be a formal presentation. Excel file would be fine. Jake said agreed, breakdown offline would be great. I might add, in order to make sure we can get some sort of public commentary on it for this group. If we do look at some of that offline, whenever we can and get around to it, but understand the holidays, we could perhaps decide as a group which ones we do want to review in greater detail on, like in the meeting. I'm going to assume it would probably be some of the biggest budget projects, and just dive into not just the title of the project, but what really is this project. I think to Chris's point, perhaps sometimes it's hard to tell what a project is just by the name.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's, oh, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's important. I wouldn't have raised it if it wasn't. I would say that the value is one thing, like the money value is one thing, but also, where did it score? Was it such a high score that you had to have it, right? And let's look at that and say, wow, that's right. We now understand why you scored so high. Maybe it was $100,000 project, big deal, right? But I'd like to see that and know that. And then for 2023, again, we'd like to see what's cooking in the budget for 2023 before it gets settled, so that we can talk about that and have that same kind of granularity, so that we can comment on that. Over.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I hear what you guys are saying loud and clear. And again, happy soldier and happy to participate in every way possible. I'll say on some of the multi-year projects, it's going to be a little bit harder to get some of that equity scoring. Some of these actually even predate my employment here. But if we wanted to look holistically, say at a 2021 or a 2022 budget process and what those projects look like and what they were scored, I think that's information that we can potentially get together. Looking holistically at our whole portfolio, again, that will take some time in doing, and I'll leave that to Deputy Manager Williams and Director Phipps to help us understand, what we need to share there and what this group charters out. But again, I'm a happy soldier here and happy to help to accommodate whatever the questions are. And then as far as 2023 goes, that layering that I talked about, where we take input from this group, is absolutely something that we want to make sure that we inform you guys and understand your concerns and needs there. And that's something that we will be bringing to you guys. I will just say, to Chris's point, I think you're maybe trying to get to this prior to the allocation level, and that's where it's really out of our hands. So if there's, we get $10 million in CIP funding from sales and use taxes, it is up to community or capital planning and programming to decide that allocation for DOTI, for DDPHE, for libraries, all of those. Then it comes down to us. When the dollar amount hits us, then we start to have some understanding of what those programs and projects look like. So I don't know. I don't know if that sufficiently answered your question, but I'm hoping, I hope.
It absolutely does. And I don't expect to change the allocation. I just want to make sure that whatever DOTI is given to spend, that this advisory panel is in agreement with it.
Yeah, I think and I see that Nick's popped up, but I think I think the point that we involve you at is where we've sort of run through and scored everything, and we understand what that scoring is, so that you can help understand that as well. And I think we're open to a conversation, but I'll let Nick speak, because I saw him pop back up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I think, obviously the intent of these first two, with kind of the advising on the budget being in the charter, here, wanted to provide you guys with a good base here these last 2 months. We can, all the information is public. We'll provide you with as much detail as you want, but that's a long meeting if we're going to go through on that. And I think kind of starting to get into the nitty gritty of projects and how they're scored, that's an obvious next step for this group.
Anything else from you guys? Oh, sorry, Antonio, go ahead.
I think this will also be a good quick segue talking about, when we dive out into our subcommittees, so that we can have that deeper dive of projects as well. So we can definitely, if people want to form a group where we do have that deeper dive and looking at those projects, I think the point, Chris, is we just want to kind of work our way backwards of, hey, here was a project that was completed. How did you get there? And then we can extrapolate the understanding of that process throughout all the rest of the projects of how you select that. So I think that'll be a good group in terms of when we are thinking about subcommittees, to have that project specific subcommittee for people who really want to dive into that, so that we can keep that larger advisory board time open. So.
All right. Anything else from you guys? I almost took Mr. Eisinger's advice and stretched and took a bio break, and thank goodness I didn't, because I would have been far away while you guys were answering questions or asking questions with a blank screen. So anything else from me? All right, I'm going to hang on through John's thing. Just listen on Vision Zero, and appreciate being invited again. Happy to come whenever you guys need me, and thanks so much.
All right, can you hear me? I think so. Okay, great. Can you see a screen that says Denver's Vision Zero Safety Program? All right, I think I figured this out. Excellent. Well, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to address members of DOTI's advisory board about Denver's Vision Zero program. My name is Rolf Eisinger, and I help manage the Vision Zero program, which includes an incredible team of transportation engineers, public health professionals, transportation planners, experts in marketing outreach, and law enforcement. So during the next 15 or so minutes, I'll provide a brief overview about the program, including history of Denver's Vision Zero program, the history of Vision Zero, our crash history and trends, project selection process, case studies, and a couple completed and current projects. If there's time, we have a few more on the slide deck too, if you're interested. So let's see here, we'll just kind of hit this button over here. So some of you may be familiar with Vision Zero, but for those who are not, Vision Zero is really a traffic safety strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all, regardless of mode choice. So why Vision Zero in Denver? Just kind of want to start out looking at some of these stats. Worldwide, there are about 1.35 million people killed on roadways. If we bring it here to the United States, nationally, there were about 40,000 people who were killed. In Colorado, almost 550 people killed in 2020. And bringing it home to Denver, 57 people lost their lives on our roads last year, just here in Denver. And, stats, one way to explain the why about Vision Zero, but I got to hand it to the Denver Regional Council of Governments, Dr. Cog. They captured this really well in a short video, and I was hoping to share it with you if I can get my sound to work as well. I think I got to hit share sound. Let's see if this works. Maybe some of you have already seen this video, but I think it does a pretty good job. Hear it?
I would only be guessing maybe 1,500.
Couple hundred? I don't know, say 1,000. Probably over a few dozen, I'd have to say. Alcohol related?
Texting and driving.
Road rage?
I would say sadly not.
No. Probably not.
I'm hoping for that.
Hundred, 150?
I think less than 100.
How could you quantify such a thing?
None. I mean, nobody needs to die.
There's no reason for it.
Zero. Zero? Zero. Absolutely.
Zero.
Zero, of course.
Yeah.
Zero. Yeah, they should shoot for that. Absolutely. Ideally, yes.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Obviously, yeah. Zero would be the best goal.
So I think especially the last question in terms of thinking about our family members, we'd all say zero. And that's really, I think, brings it home in terms of why our goal is zero. But let's ask where it started. Going back a little bit of history here. So Sweden was the first to develop Vision Zero in 1994. In 1997, Sweden passed the Road Traffic Safety Bill that required traffic fatalities and serious injuries to be reduced to zero by 2020 last year. Though they haven't hit zero, they drastically decreased their traffic fatalities by half. So that's pretty good considering. Also, meanwhile, so since then, the philosophy of Vision Zero, and many of you might be familiar with this, so bear with me. I'm just kind of going through some of the history, but the philosophy of Vision Zero hopped over the pond over here to the States, and several cities have adopted Vision Zero. But what does that mean? It's really a clear goal, again, of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries. So how do they do this? How do we do it? Either the mayor has made a public commitment to Vision Zero, there is a Vision Zero plan or strategy in place, or a clear timeline for one to be instated. Also, there are key departments, including transportation, public health, possibly the mayor's office, who are leading this effort. Also revisiting our traditional approach to traffic safety. So instead, the Vision Zero strategy acknowledges that traffic deaths are preventable, and people are going to make mistakes, but hopefully their mistakes won't cost them their lives. Also focus on a system level over individual behaviors. We think of speed as a fundamental pillar of Vision Zero, because the speed increases the severity and also frequency of crashes. I'd just like to point out kind of like this Venn diagram, right? So Vision Zero, it really takes a multi-pronged approach, including people, our traffic engineers, our public health experts and professionals, also compliance. All in thinking about equity, and regardless of mode, who you are. So when did Denver pledge Vision Zero? So Mayor Hancock committed to eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries in 2016. That's when a lot of work really started on the Vision Zero action plan. It took about a year or so to get the funding, develop the action plan. Here in 2018 is when I was hired to help manage the program. And the plan, I should say, was published in 2017, and then I was hired on. If we look at a little bit more about the plan, we can see that it's broken up in terms of not only projects, but policies and other programmatic functions for the plan. Sharing a little bit about our crash deaths. Even though we saw the lowest number of traffic fatalities in 2020 last year, since releasing the plan, this year is on track to being one of the highest years of traffic fatalities since 2020, 2000 and 2001. And unfortunately, this is a national trend. We have seen other cities across the country, even in 2020, see a spike in traffic fatalities where we saw a decrease. But this year, we're also seeing that spike. We can get into some of those reasons and hypotheses later if you're interested. And I can share a link to an article that I found interesting from the LA Times about it. But I'd say, where we are implementing our Vision Zero safety improvements and studying them, we're seeing safety improvements. And one example is here at 20th Street and I-25. So from 2013 to 2018, there were 40 similar harmful crashes where a single vehicle collided with the barrier. You can probably see on your screen with all the tire marks, resulting in 2 fatalities, 4 crashes with serious injuries. At least 14 were DUI related. And after reviewing the demographic information, we learned that almost 80% of the people crashing were not Denver residents. Really spoke to, well, they weren't maybe familiar with the road. And therefore we put up message board signs. We worked with the police department. They did additional DUI checks along with our engineers and with DOTI, improving signage and markings. And we hadn't had a single fatal SBI or crash into the barrier for in 2019, 2020. And unfortunately, I had to put the data on here just a couple minutes ago because I got a report that there was 1 fatal crash over the weekend at this location. We don't know all the details, so therefore it's under investigation. Could have been a heart attack, could have been something else. But from what I know, there was a fatal crash at that location. So we, talking about a little bit the how do we prioritize our improvements? Well, we kind of look to see how Denver commutes. How do Denverites move around? And then we look at the modes that are represented in our crashes, and we see that people walking, bicycling, and riding motorcycles are overrepresented in our crash data, and therefore those are the modes that we try to focus on. More vulnerable roadway users. And we also look at where these crashes are happening, acknowledging that 50% of our traffic fatalities happen on 5% of our roadways. We branded this as our high injury network. These are roads that are higher speeds, higher volumes. You all are probably pretty familiar with these, either it be Federal, Chambers, Peoria, Colorado, just to name a few. In addition to looking at data to prioritize project, we also are looking at the DOTI Equity Index, which includes census data layers, including populations without vehicle ownership and other transportation safety indicators. We can get into more of that later if you're interested, but basically it's a little bit of this inverted L, if you will. Maybe you can see my cursor, but the darker blue areas are, another way of saying it is a higher exposure to traffic crashes. Maybe those are the areas where if you don't have a vehicle and you're walking or bicycling more often or using transit, and you don't have a sidewalk, then you're going to be walking in the roadway and your exposure is higher, right? So where can we identify these areas to ensure that they have adequate sidewalks, so pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, transit facilities, and in order to improve safety. So in addition to looking at the data to prioritize projects, we're also looking and reviewing our serious crashes and fatals through a new program. It's our rapid response process. It's really a way of looking at all fatal crashes and also our vulnerable roadway user SBI crashes, those are the serious bodily injury crashes, to determine if there are any quick fixes that can be made. You know, maybe there's a tree limb covering a stop sign, you know, something as simple as that. But, you know, maybe there's some other quick improvements that will prevent future crashes from happening. If there aren't quick improvements, maybe there are, you know, short-term, midterm, long-term improvements that we keep track of that are opportunities. But this is just one example at North Walnut Street and East 40th Street, where there's a motorcyclist leaving downtown at a high rate of speed, missed the turn, and crashed into the fence that separated the roadway from the light rail. And we went out there, we put in some additional signage, warning signs, some reflective posts, just to let folks know that, hey, there's a corner here, and slow down. So it seems to have worked so far at this location. Another program we've implemented is something called a road safety audit program. So it's similar, I guess, on a greater scale to the rapid response. It's where we take a multidisciplinary team and we review a whole corridor and determine, again, quick fixes that we can get out with our maintenance teams to improve. Maybe a sign fell down, maybe you know, trees, brushes, trimming, but also some midterm and long-term project opportunities. We track these opportunities in an internal dashboard, which we can share here real quick. So we got short-term and long-term, midterm, and we can see where these improvements are because we map them. So this is Sheridan down here. Here's Colorado. Here's Chambers, Havana down here. Those are areas that through our methodology, we determined that let's go ahead and do a road safety audit along these corridors. Again, we include our law enforcement and first responders, traffic engineers, transportation planners. Sometimes we'll include some of the business owners along the corridor or some of our advocates who are familiar with the area. Because if they're living on the street and they see it, they can provide valuable information for the team. Another effort is looking at speed reduction opportunities, which includes our recent council's proposal to decrease the default speed limit. Maybe some of you have heard of this, from 25 to 20 on our neighborhood streets, but also looking at effective ways to reduce speeds on our high injury network. And it may not be reducing the actual speed limit, but just getting better compliance of the speed on those corridors through evidence-based practices. Maybe it's improving sign frequency, sign size, and then measuring it to see if there's an impact. And then here, just a few other slides I threw in here. I think I'm almost done here, but here's a bicycle safety course. So there were a couple bicycle fatalities this year that happened without a motor vehicle, that happened without another mode. It seems as though they just kind of crashed on their own, succumbed to their injuries. Kind of speaks to, well, what can we do? Provide better education, training opportunities, and we start with our kids, safe routes to school, right? So we have this bicycle education safety course out at the Mount Bello Community Center, where kids can learn, or adults, whoever. I got to say, I've been out there and it's a lot of fun to ride around, practicing cornering and skills. But that's just one example of a skills course. In addition to safe routes to school, identifying grant opportunities. So this is a grant opportunity around McAuliffe Middle School and increasing sidewalk connectivity in this neighborhood. And here's another example where we use some paint and post treatments on East Colfax. So we did some pre and post evaluation. This is some pre-evaluation, and then we go ahead and we put in the hardened center line and some bump outs. So the hardened center line, it helps the motorists who are turn slower help them yield to pedestrians, especially with the bump outs. It makes it a little easier. So these are some of the treatments that we are putting in at a more rapid pace. And just a couple others if you're interested, but again, transit, very safe mode of travel. So providing bus only lanes downtown, also protected intersections for our bicyclists, but they also act to help our pedestrians cross the street too. But in the last couple of here, so promoting and sharing our traffic safety projects and different tips and ways to stay safe out there for all modes through our communications and event outreach. So this is during the Tasty Colfax, promoting our Vision Zero program and things people can do to stay safe. And I just want to say thank you for the time and happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, John. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. Really appreciated it. One of the questions I have is, in some places in Denver, we had a fatality in North Denver at 32nd and Lowell not too long ago, and it happens all across the city. But in that case, the folks were saying, hey, we'd like more significant traffic calming, like to see more speed bumps and things like that. And a lot of answers that we've gotten were, hey, we can't allow that with, some of the regulations we have with our fire department. On the other side of Sheridan Boulevard, we're seeing, traffic calming, raised crosswalks, and they're working in conjunction with West Metro Fire. Has there been any collaborations to look at what other folks are doing in Colorado with regards to fire departments or snow removal, looking at best practices to see kind of what people have been doing in Edgewater or Wheat Ridge, where they have these more aggressive traffic calming treatments and things like that, and how they've made their fire departments comfortable with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, we just released our street design guidelines that do include quite a bit of feedback and cooperation with the fire department. And I've reviewed them, but that's a good question of what other communities have done with their fire departments and where we were at with that effort. I did not lead that effort, so I was in the room with our fire department per se, but something I can ask the team and get back to you if you'd like.
Thanks.
Paul, looks like you're up.
I'm just curious if it's been a price tag affixed to upgrading signage if the 20 passes.
Can you repeat that? Are you saying, have we reviewed the price tag?
If the 20 mile per hour limit were to pass through council, has a study or someone crunched the numbers on replacing all the signage in residential areas in Denver?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have not done a full sign sweep yet. And that'd have to be done before, putting out the signs. In addition to that, part of the study was looking at, to your point, where are the existing signs and does it make sense just to swap them where they're at? Or does it make sense to have a little more strategy behind where we place those signs? For a while there, if somebody called through 311 and asked, hey, people are speeding down a road, our reaction was to put up a sign. But if we start looking at where those signs are placed, there may not be much rhyme or reason from a holistic standpoint. So figuring out where does it make sense to place these signs, so that would be part of it too. But yeah, better understanding that will better understand that, what that total price tag will be.
If I can, I'll jump in and answer a little bit more on that. We actually are in the process of, the bill that's going through City Council is to address unmarked areas. In addition to those unmarked areas, DOTI feels necessary to make sure that we make sure that all neighborhoods that are marked have the same speed limit as well. Changing those to 20. The reason those neighborhoods have been marked over the years, decades of city council members and RNOs and DPD requesting signage in neighborhoods, which typically we don't sign our neighborhoods, they stay unsigned. But that's why those signs will have to change or be removed. And then some of the signage is going to be moved towards entryways. So if you're on a collector going into the neighborhood, you'll see that the neighborhood speed limit is 20 miles per hour. Our estimated costs on that change and everything is around $1 million to get it done. So there's some clarity there.
Thanks, Jason. Jake and then Joe.
Yeah, Alan stole some words out of my mouth, but I think there's three things that I regularly hear from the city that is impacting the ability to make a Vision Zero based decision. And that is the fire department, that is the manual of uniform traffic control devices, everyone's favorite answer to a 311 request, it seems. And then also kind of an inability to change use of travel lane. For example, on certain streets that may be from a travel lane to a parking lane, or some other use on the street. What ability and access does the Vision Zero program have to really push back on those departments? Because I understand that like the fire department, needs to get their numbers for response time down, but if most of the things they're responding to is crashes, that's a bit of a self-perpetuating problem. And same with the manual of uniform traffic control. I know we need to get our federal funding, but if our federal funding's killing our citizens, like obviously we need to find ways to push back. So I'm just kind of curious what ability and autonomy this program has to really push back against it, because it seems to be a consistent threat to its success.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, in terms of the MUTCD federal right guidelines, they also recently sent out new safety countermeasures, right? And those are best practices that we can lean on now, not as though we weren't already leaning on before, but definitely helps. I could speak to, lane allocation with the transit lanes that have been installed. So there are opportunities that we have been doing here. And as we continue to integrate Vision Zero throughout all the work we do, I think we'll continue to see more of those efforts in cooperation with other departments.
Is that something that's like if you had a request as someone on the Vision Zero team, like would you like this advisory board to spend cycles thinking about how we interact with other departments like the fire department and how we can work with them to come to, I guess the question being, does DOTI need political cover on some of these instances to work with the fire department? Because I know in particular, like the shared streets basically became 50-mile-per-hour zones once the fire department had their input on the design.
Rolf, if I could jump in real quick, I think we have a pretty collaborative relationship with these other departments. Speed bumps, of course, I'm not preaching the choir here, aren't kind of the silver bullet here. So if not necessarily political cover, but I think, ideas and engagement and what you guys are seeing, and if you're seeing other communities are doing it well, things like that. So I don't think we're at a point where we would need political cover. I think it's still a pretty productive relationship with these sister agencies, but certainly, we and the other agencies we work with are always willing to look at new techniques, look at new methods, things like that, stuff that allows us to accomplish our goals while still allowing, obviously the priority of the fire department to be able to respond in a timely manner.
Thanks, Nick.
Jump in, Joe.
Okay, well, my question is, I've noticed I go down 6th Avenue and notice when you put out speed indicators, it seems to have a really good effect. And of course, those are temporary, and I don't know they need to be permanent, but I think I didn't see any of that in the presentation role, but I'm sure you're doing that. And on the same hand, I think if we got, I don't know enough about it, but smart lights and things like that, I think a lot of people get frustrated. So in my area, you see them running red lights all the time at the end. And I think if we didn't frustrate them as much, maybe they wouldn't run them so often. So just hopefully that's part of the formula that you're looking at, as opposed to just physical barriers and things like that.
No, you bring up a good point about what we call driver feedback signs. And we're currently doing a study now, which to be honest, I haven't really seen any other municipality really evaluate the effectiveness of driver feedback signs in terms of how long do you put them out? If they're out year round, do they just kind of fade in the background? And does compliance decrease? Do they work on multi-lane roadways, or do they work, better in school zone areas? I always find it amusing in terms of, we all have driver feedback signs right in front of us when we're driving our vehicles. It's like 6 inches away from us, but for some reason we got to install like a $15,000 sign that flashes your speed as you're going by it. But nonetheless, so we're going to look at this study and see how that works. In addition to the timing of the lights, two different thoughts on that. One is, especially those late night crashes, where if we can improve the signalization of the lights, we can actually improve safety. So folks aren't driving excessive speeds when there's not the congestion on our arterials, collectors, busier roadways. But yeah, I mean, there are other ways of getting around our city too, in terms of our transit, people on bikes, people walking. So there's that other component too.
Alan, and then we'll close it out with one more question.
Sorry,
Alan,
still
did you get your hand
muted.
up?
Thanks.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that. I just want to say thank you again for your work on this. It's so important. Over on this side of town, Federal is our deadliest street by far, right? As you're well aware. Recently, when we saw some safety projects made on the southern end of Federal, we saw some lane widenings, right? And we know that wider lanes mean faster traffic. And as you said, speed kills, right? So I guess my question is there any effort to be made with some of the maybe more traditional engineers to have a little more progressive training as to working to limit speeds on some of these high injury corridors that so many people die, disproportionately communities of color, right? To not just accelerate the flow of traffic, but really to have road diets and calm it more.
No, that's a good point. Some of these projects, as you probably know, take a long time to arrive, right? So those decisions to make that road and widen it could have been done 20 years ago. I'll say that we're working on a project along Federal to identify that excess space, hatch it out, determine if we can narrow any lanes to your point. And I believe there are about 10 to maybe 12, maybe 15 locations that we're going to be doing that. So yeah, I hear you.
And John, I'll close it out kind of in the summary of just kind of hearing everyone's comments, which is really getting back to street design. And as a planner who works directly with traffic engineers every day on projects, what do we have to do to get the complete streets not adopted just as a policy? Because just based on my experience, when it comes to that, at the end of the day, we refer back to our standards. So what do we have to do, or what does the city have to do to elevate complete streets from being policy only to the standard for our streets? Because I think that is what will take precedence when we're reviewing projects, in that whole planning process. We have our policy, but at the end of the day, it is the design guidelines or the standards that are black and white that give us that have to be abided, where not saying policy or a guideline doesn't have to be abided by, but it is grayer. And so what is that step that we have to do to elevate that from being a policy to being the standard for our streets here in Denver?
That's another good question. Part of it is ensuring that our engineers are familiar with the policy, they're comfortable with it, right? But also I'd recommend, something else that we are doing is working on more outcome evaluation metrics, process evaluation metrics. So, you know, did the project you installed with safety as your number one goal, is it achieving that, right? And what metrics are you capturing before the project? What metrics are you capturing after the project? So you can show, in fact, yes, or are there other opportunities after the project's installed that we can put in that maybe we missed or didn't think of or whatever, right? To continue to improve that location to meet that safety intent. So one, yes, ensuring that, you know, we're using the complete street guidelines, but then also ensuring that we're meeting the intent of the project with safety as our number one goal.
Okay, I mean, I like that answer, but you know, the metric that we have in front of us today is, you know, 74, 75 people have died on our streets. And that's the metric that we go off. And that's an increase over the last couple of years. So instead of, you know, having these evaluations or metrics, which are good, I mean, there is a manual, a design that, you know, for example, shorten the streets of pedestrians crossing over, you know, federal COFAX. Like, how can we just elevate those policies or guidelines that we already have and adopted to make that the standard, so that, you know, we're not having to go back to revisit where when we start off and we design our streets. I think what you're seeing is the frustration of we have our standards and we've had the complete streets policy for a couple of years now, yet our numbers are still going up. And so I think it's to the point where we want to see that this just becomes our norm and not just an extra on top of the standards. And so I don't know if you really have to answer that question, but I know just based off of the feedback and the questions that you've gotten today is what we're doing now, which is having the complete streets policy being an extra is not enough. And we want to see it be incorporated as the standard, because it includes those things that help us get to those safer streets where design slows down the speed of cars traveling on the roads and things of that nature. So I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that we have as a group, and probably want to see some immediate reaction on that and what we'll be pushing for, just because we understand that better designed streets saves lives very, very much so than having, like you said, a $15,000 sign over there just tell us how fast we're going when we already know that stuff. So I think that's where we're headed, just based off the conversation that we've had so far. So you don't have to respond, but I just want to elevate that based off what I'm seeing in the chats and the questions that were brought forth today.
And I'll say that we did recently publish new standards, not just a complete streets policy, but we've developed standards that are now on our website. And those are the things that they are talking about in terms of the bump outs, traffic calming, et cetera. And those are, maybe Nick, you can help me remember, but I believe the last 8 months were they finalized, and maybe sooner. So
yeah, Rolf, and it's a not to cut you off there, but yeah, new standards. It's a combination of new standards. Some will be approached through rules and regulation, and some will be approached through ordinance change if necessary, and that's a little bit farther down the road. But yeah, no, this isn't just a policy. These are standards at this point, and that's the direction we're headed.
And just kind of one other thing in terms of standards, really looking at the crashes and pairing the root cause of the crash to an effective countermeasure. And yes, street design can do a lot, but, you know, seeing substance abuse or other things that, you know, are occurring on our streets behind the wheel speaks to other effective partnerships and countermeasures to go after too. So, but thank you.
Thanks, John. And kind of effort and time. I know we're excited about that topic. I think we might need to bypass the bylaws finalization and kind of jump right to the board leadership elections to see if we can get that going, since that's coming up soon. And if we have time, kind of come back to that. So Jonathan, did you want to take that over?
Sure thing. We'll just state briefly, we have received a number of nominations, and I am following up with those who received a nomination for acceptances. I was a little bit behind my own timelines on this one, so I haven't received the last couple I'm waiting for. Only updates to state here are I will send out the complete officer slate once I receive final acceptances or declinations of nominations. With that acceptance of the nomination, everyone is committing to write a statement of 200 words or less describing why they feel they're well suited to the role and what interests them in the role, which will be shared with this group in advance of our next meeting. During our next meeting, January, is when we'll actually complete the officer elections.
Thanks, Jonathan. Did anyone have any questions on that topic or no?
Just wondering, any thoughts yet on moving to in-person since everybody is supposed to be vaccinated?
That's a good question. Maybe Michelle, we could put out a poll for that to the group in between this meeting and January to kind of see how everyone is feeling. I know, we do have a new introduction of Omicron and things of that nature. So maybe we can put out a poll to see how people are feeling about that. What are people's thoughts on that? Okay.
I also need to check with the mayor and the city and find out where we are. I'm thinking we're moving into, with the mask mandate and everything that we're doing, I can gather as much information, but I will not, obviously we're not going to know what January is going to look like or February. So I'll keep everybody in the loop. We can do a poll amongst ourselves, but I would not anticipate the January meeting being in person. I think we have to get through the winter, but I'll let you know what the city says, and then we can do a poll amongst ourselves and see how many will actually would show up for an in-person meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Would it be okay if we push the bylaws finalization to the next meeting and get everyone's thoughts on agenda topics for the next meeting in the interest of time? Would everyone be okay with that? Jake, you have your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious on the bylaws. I don't know if there's a chance, if we have unanimous consent, to just move them along really, really quickly. I think they've been out there for a while. I'm a little eager to check that one off.
Same. Did anyone want to second that motion? Chris, you got your hand up, or are you? Okay, gotcha.
Seconding that motion.
Cool. What we'll do is have everyone put in the chat, and then also I'll just put the question to have the bylaws approved. And I'll go down the line. Alan?
I vote in favor. Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Jake?
Aye.
Aileen? Alicia?
Aye.
Christopher?
Aye.
Paul? Brian?
Aye.
Awesome. Lucia?
Aye.
Raymond?
Aye.
Manny?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Michael?
Yes.
Perfect. Michelle, did we need to put that in the chat too? I know we were talking about some transcripts.
No, we're fine. If this is all recorded.
Perfect.
And then what I'll do now that you guys have approved your bylaws, I'll post them to the website.
Nice. Awesome.
Yay.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Let's talk about agenda topics. Just kind of come off mic and let it rip.
Actually, sorry to remind briefly, this is Jonathan. I believe at the end of last call, we listed out a number of topics and determined that only 2 of them could fit into today's agenda. Do we have written somewhere what the additional, I think it was 3 that sort of rolled over were? Might want to consider those first.
Michelle, we did get Ben to join for January, right?
Well, I do know, I knew one of them was equity, obviously.
Okay.
And then our January meeting, Antonio reached out to the mayor's office of equity And we have a speaker coming for that, and then DOTI's equity index and what we look at too. So I would imagine January will be equity, which was one of our topics that you guys had wanted.
So it sounds like 2 presentations from 2 on equity potentially, which will take some time. And then I don't have the list in front of me from last meeting.
Nick recommended the kind of scoring criteria earlier in this meeting. I think that would be interesting to see the project scoring.
Ooh, sidewalks was one too. Yep. Okay. Michelle, do you think that if we did I'm gonna look in here, just make sure I don't miss anyone in the chat. Sidewalks, Lucia, increasing mobility.
Antonio, I was wondering about subcommittees as an agenda item and developing those and starting to locate people on those. I know it's a little weird given we have an election coming up, but it'd be good to establish the subcommittees, even if we decide the next leader needs to appoint, whether you or not.
So are you saying we talk about subcommittees next meeting or after we have the?
I think as soon as possible, it will help us extend our bandwidth if we have subcommittees in place.
That sounds good to me. Anyone out opposed that? Perfect. Well, let's add that as our 3rd agenda item as subcommittee. So we'll have the 2 equity talks and then subcommittees. And then that would give us a good start off to 2022.
And elections.
And elections to that.
And just looking at the chat, Antonio, I think some folks are asking for formal documentation of all the projects, maybe by February, to give Zach and his team maybe some time to prepare that. So it's not a surprise a few weeks in advance.
Perfect. I wrote that down. Awesome. Well, I don't want to take anyone's time. Thank you guys for standing on an extra 2 minutes and just to being a part of this group. So thank you guys. If anyone doesn't have anything else, we'll talk soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Happy holidays, everybody.